Okay, I'm just going to introduce Tamas now. So Tamas is a Google developer expert in web technologies and a developer evangelist. He has more than a decade of experience delivering technical training to large prestigious organizations. He's passionate about unlocking the latest and greatest features of web development. So his talk titled Welcome to Space Jam. So talk this talk will be talking about utilizing the key concepts of the Jamstack. So I'll pass the floor now to Tamas to start with the talk. On to you, Tamas.
Thank you for the introduction, and hello to everyone attending this particular workshop. I really appreciate it that you are here. And without anything further to do, let's get started. So the title of the talk is Welcome to the Space Jam, and that's just a funny sort of thing that I added to this workshop because I don't know how many of you are familiar with the Space Jam as the film, about Bugs Bunny, and I think it was Michael Jordan in the film. It's a film from the 90s. It has absolutely nothing to do with the talk. I just thought it would be fun to edit since we're going to talk about the Jamstack, and when I first heard about the Jamstack, I immediately made this connection between the Space Jam and the Jamstack. So yeah, my name is Tamas. I put my Twitter handle on the very first page here. So if you have any questions about this particular talk, once this event is over or you want to discuss something, then my DMs are open. So feel free to reach out to me via Twitter. So that's TPIROS is how you can find me. So in today's workshop, it's going to have sort of two parts. The first section is going to be talking about the Jamstack. So I'm going to show you some slides that I prepared just to give you a very brief overview and trying to highlight the key aspects and the key concepts behind the Jamstack so everyone has an understanding about the stack, what it is, why it's useful, what can you do with it, etc., etc. And then going forwards, we're going to take a look at two applications. One very, very simple application that I just want to show you, so that you grasp the concept of Gatsby, which is going to be a particular tool that we're going to be using in this workshop. And then, because we don't have much time, I also prepared a much larger application, which I will show you. I'm going to show you some of the highlights from that application, so to speak, which is going to be a sort of full-blown e-commerce website created using the Jamstack. And I'm also going to share a resource with you towards the end of this workshop where I have a video course, which is for free, of course. So there's this free video course where I put together the same application that I'm talking about here today. So, it's about 2 or 3 hours long. So if something doesn't make sense what I'm talking about today, or if you want to learn more, or you want to pause and think about a particular concept, then you can always go to that resource and just watch the videos at your own convenience. So the first question is, what is the Jamstack? And for those of you who have heard about the Jamstack, please bear with me because I'm just trying to make sure that everyone is brought up to the same level when it comes to the Jamstack knowledge. So I'm going to talk about some very basic stuff here, but then we're going to dive deeper into the actual code and creating an app. So what is a Jamstack? So a Jamstack is an architecture that allows developers to create fast, secure, and dynamic applications using JavaScript, a myriad of APIs, and pre-rendered markup, all served on edge servers. Okay, so this is a very fancy description of what the Jamstack is, but there are a bunch of things that could be highlighted from this particular statement. So first of all, the Jamstack is an architecture. Okay, so it's an architecture on how you would build and design a web application. The web applications that you would build and design will by default be fast, secure, and dynamic in nature. Okay, so these are, again, some key aspects of the Jamstack: fast, secure, and dynamic. And you can use JavaScript, APIs, and something that is called a pre-rendered markup to create a web page for the Jamstack. Now, for those of you who sort of start to pay attention now, you can see that the Jam is, of course, JavaScript APIs, and markup. So that's where the name is coming from. That's the abbreviation for Jam inside the Jamstack. And this particular statement has this last bit here that says served on edge servers. Okay, so the question probably that you're thinking at this moment is, what is an edge server? So there's the two types of servers that you need to differentiate. One is an origin server, and the other one is an edge server. So if you come from a web development background, then I'm sure you have heard about the LAMP stack, which is Linux, Apache, MySQL, and PHP. So in that traditional setup, you have an Apache server running. So you have an actual server running somewhere, which is accepting requests and provides you with a response. Okay, so that is what you would refer to as an origin server. So the sole purpose of an origin server is to accept incoming requests being requests coming in from clients being the browser. So you type in example.com, a request goes to Apache does something with it. It could be generating some PHP code. It could also, for example, execute some MySQL queries from PHP, put together the template that is needed, and then serves that template back to the browser, and that's what you see as an end result. So the key bit to remember here is that there is some processing happening on a server environment at request time. So every time when you request something, the server is going to do some work behind the scenes. Now compare that with what we're talking about here, which is an edge server. Now edge server may be sort of a name that you haven't heard before, but if you think about an edge server, you will understand that an edge server is really just a CDN server. Okay, so edge servers are servers that are located throughout the globe. They are interconnected, which is basically what a CDN network is, right? And I'm sure that you have used a CDN before. So if you use something like a jQuery, or if you use something like a Bootstrap environment, you would have used a CDN to insert that particular framework of your choice into your HTML. Now, the difference between an origin server and an edge server is the fact that edge servers, first of all, serve content to the closest requesting user, right? So if I'm a user in London and I request your page, all the assets for that particular page are going to be served up to me from a data center, from a CDN server, very close to my location somewhere in London. If I'm in Brunei, then the same assets will be served from a server or from a CDN server very close to my location somewhere in or around Brunei. So what I'm trying to say is that when you have an application served from the edge server, by default, you sort of lose your server-side capabilities, right? An edge server cannot run server-side code. It can only show you some JavaScript, some CSS, and some HTML as well. So basically, it's kind of static in a way, okay? So the difference between an origin server and an edge server is that an origin server can execute server-side code, and it can generate this or do this work at request time. An edge server, on the other hand, must have the full-blown markup already in place because it cannot do any work at request time. Okay, so that's a key difference that we're going to come back to. So let's take a look at these individual components from the Jamstack, right? So JAM, JavaScript APIs, and markup. And let's start with JavaScript. So JavaScript inside the Jamstack is used for things like fetching data from a serverless function. And what a serverless function is, we're going to talk about that in a minute as well. So with JavaScript, essentially you make sure that your Jamstack application is interactive, it has some dynamic events, and it has something that is called progressive enhancement, right? So the JavaScript in the Jamstack is really for client-side JavaScript, trying to make your application sort of more, better, trying to fetch data and just try to leverage modern-day JavaScript and what modern-day JavaScript gives you inside your application. Then we have APIs, right? That's the A part from the Jamstack. And I have two quotes here on this particular slide. So there's an API for that, and then standing on the shoulders of giants. So why do I have these two sort of statements written up here? Let's talk about the first one, which is there's an API for that. So I don't know how many of you remember when Apple, they released the new iPhone, and then along with the iPhone, they also, of course, released the App Store. And I think it was somewhere in the maybe late 2000s, 2006, 7-ish, I think, if I remember correctly. They released a TV advert in the US, which is sort of advocating their phone as well as their App Store. Because back in the day, this whole idea, this whole concept of the App Store was very new to people, and then there was literally an app that they could install and download and install for everything, right? So the punchline of this TV advert was, no matter what you want to do, if you have an iPhone, you can do it, and probably there's an app for that, right? That was the sort of messaging that Apple tried to do. So in the same way, the messaging that I'm trying to do today to you is that if you think about the web development ecosystem, I'm sure no matter what you want to do, no matter what functionality you want to add to your app, I guarantee that there is an API for that, right? So there are a lot of companies providing APIs and SDKs to do a lot of things. For example, if you want to add payments to your system, you want to accept payments on your website, then you can use PayPal, or you could use Stripe, for example. If you want to do authentication, then you can use the SDKs and the APIs provided to you by Auth0, for example. You want to work with forms, there's FormsFree. You want to manage your images and videos, and you want to optimize and transform them automatically, then again, you have Cloudinary. So, there's basically a provider for everything in today's web development ecosystem. So that's why there's an API for that. And then standing on the shoulders of giants. Again, I think that's a more famous quote than there's an app for that. But basically, what I'm trying to say with that sentence is, all these companies, so for example, let's talk about PayPal or Stripe, right? So if you would like to create a payment system inside your application, you would try to do this on your own, it would be a lot of work, right? But luckily, there are companies who are sort of domain experts in what they do, right? So PayPal and Stripe does only one thing. They do payments online, right? That's their core business. They've been doing it for many, many years. So they are sort of experts in that field. So that means that if you want to make sure that you have a solution that works, scales automatically, you don't need to figure out how to set the entire environment and the infrastructure around this up, because they already do it for you. So that's what I'm saying, standing on the shoulders of giants, leverage the knowledge and expertise of companies who specialize in a particular thing, and then use their APIs and use their SDKs inside your application. And the other thing that's kind of relevant here is, if you think about something like we're going to build an e-commerce platform. So, you create an e-commerce website, it has payments and everything, and you coded everything. And let's say you sort of envisioned that your application, your e-commerce site, is going to see, 100 visitors per day. Okay, you kind of anticipated that number. And so, I don't know, a festive season comes, like Christmas comes, or summer holiday comes, and now suddenly you have 10,000 people visiting your website and trying to make a purchase. Your infrastructure may not be able to cope, right? But if you're using an SDK of a provider for payments, that is automatically going to scale up or down based on your usage, right? You don't need to worry about the infrastructure behind the payment as well. You don't need to know how PayPal or how Stripe is actually, running their infrastructure. What matters is that they guarantee to you that no matter how many people are going to visit your site, their services are going to be available for you and their services are going to still work. And, you just let them worry about all the details with regards to the infrastructure. And then the last point on here is, serverless functions. So serverless functions are functions, basically think of them as kind of remote functions, right? So we established the fact that you don't have a server-side execution environment, right? Because you will put your website on an edge server, right? So there's no way that you can execute server-side code. Now, there could be situations when you could have your own custom API, which runs on a server side, and you want to access that. So there's no API for what you want to achieve. You want to use an in-house API. So in that case, you would need to deploy that as a serverless function. Or B, you have multiple APIs that you want to use from different companies, and you want to sort of mix them together. You want one API to then talk to another API, and then you want to see the response of both of those APIs. Again, in that case, you would want to use a serverless function. And serverless functions are basically, there are serverless function providers, first of all, right? So there's Google Cloud Functions, there's AWS Lambda Functions, there's Azure Functions from Microsoft, and there's some others. And basically what happens is you get a Node.js code execution environment from one of these providers. Some providers actually have capabilities to create serverless functions in Python and Go and many other languages. But let's stick with the Node.js example. So you get a Node.js execution environment, and so you can write your server-side code there. Once you deploy a serverless function, all you're going to get is just an access URL for that serverless function. From modern JavaScript, you can access that endpoint. The function gets executed. The response will then be sent back to your application, right? So you can utilize serverless functions very easily using the Jamstack as well, of course. And then we have the last sort of component, which is markup, right? So inside the Jamstack, you have this markup bit. And so in the description, we actually mentioned that this is pre-rendered markup. Okay, it's not just markup, it is pre-rendered markup. So what is a pre-rendered markup? So I mentioned that when you have an origin server, you have sort of an easy job because you make a request, server generates the response and sends it back to you. But with an edge server, the content that you need to put to the edge server must contain everything. It must have all the data and everything that you want to show to your end user, because you won't be able to do any sort of data fetch from a server to generate templates based on something. So in the world of the Jamstack, you need to pre-render your markup. You need to create your markup ahead of time. And this is commonly referred to as creating your markup at build time. So as part of your build process, as part of the build process that you run when you create a production build of your website, as part of the build, you must also generate all the HTML pages with all the data that you want to have for a particular site. Okay, and the key difference between a site that is using the Jamstack and a site that is not using the Jamstack is exactly this. One is creating the markup at request time. The other one is creating the markup at build time, ahead of time. Okay. Now, once you have your content, once you have your pages built as part of the build process, you can just take the result of that and put it to any hosting provider whatsoever. You could take it to GitHub pages. You could deploy it to things like Netlify, Vercel. You could also put it to Firebase hosting. You could put it to any place whatsoever, because an HTML page will contain all the information necessary for it to display everything or all the data and all the information that you have. And you can also access it from anywhere, right? Because normally, and we're going to take a look at some providers, but for example, if you add your entire site to a provider like Netlify, then they have a global CDN network. They have multiple CDN servers, and they automatically manage that for you. So they say, okay, here's a site. They're going to push that site live to their global CDN. That means it's accessible to everyone. And then if you do an update to your site, they will automatically invalidate the CDN cache, and they're going to push the new version of your site completely automatically throughout their CDN. Okay, so it's very easy to deploy a Jamstack website. It's very easy to manage those deployments. It's very easy to also just create a particular Jamstack site. So at this point, people start to wonder about a few things. And if you've seen some material online about the Jamstack, you may have been wondering about the same as well. So we talked about, JavaScript, and we talked about markup. Now, when you read about the Jamstack, you may have read about things like Jekyll or Hugo, and these are what are considered to be static site generators. So static site generators, if I go back one slide, static site generators are for the markup, right? So static site generators are essentially tools to create or to build pages at build time. Okay, so they are used to actually create those HTML pages. Now, Hugo is actually a static site generator that is using the Go programming language. Jekyll is a static site generator that uses the Ruby programming language. So at this point, people get confused and they say, well, how can you now talk about Go and Ruby if you said that that Jam is JavaScript APIs and markups? So how does Go enter the picture if you're talking about JavaScript? And it's important to differentiate between these two aspects, because how you create the markup, what tool, what programming language you use to create your markup, to sort of pre-render your markup or create your markup at build time, is irrelevant to whether you use JavaScript or not inside the application itself, right? So that's why static site generators either utilize JavaScript or either utilize another programming language. But what matters is that a static site generator is capable of pre-building your HTML pages. Now, as I said, there's Hugo, which is a static site generator based on Go, and it's very, very popular in the Jamstack community. There's also Jekyll, which is a static site generator that is using Ruby. There's also a vanilla JavaScript static site generator, which is called 11t. And then there are JavaScript front-end framework specific static site generators. So for example, there's Gatsby and Next.js. Both of them are based on React. Then there's Nuxt and Gritsum. Both of them are based on Vue.js. There's Scully, which is based on Angular, etc., etc., etc. So the beauty of using one of these is that if you're familiar with a front-end framework already, say React, then you can just use your existing knowledge of React. You can use, the ecosystem around React, the tools, the services, the packages that you have used before to utilize Gatsby and to create a static site using something that you're familiar with. And in fact, that's what we're going to be doing in this workshop. So as I said, there are a lot of static site generators out there. And we're going to be focusing on one particular, which is Gatsby. So Gatsby is a static site generator, which is based on React. Okay, so React-based open source framework, as I just said, you can use your knowledge of React components, React libraries, and everything that you may use in a React application, you can just use as part of a Gatsby application as well. Gatsby has some additional things, like it has a vast plugin ecosystem, which we're going to talk about a little bit. It also has built-in GraphQL queries. So for those of you not familiar with GraphQL is an API query language. It's just very easy to query for stuff using GraphQL. And this capability, this GraphQL query capability, is baked into Gatsby, straight away. It comes along with Gatsby. You don't need to install anything. You don't need to configure anything. It's just there. And essentially, the process is very simple. So you create almost like a React app, right? So you create your components, your pages, you use your React libraries, you do stuff. And then at the end of the day, Gatsby is going to take that entire sort of, in inverted commas, your React app, and it's going to generate static HTML pages based on your configuration. Okay, so that is the whole purpose of using Gatsby, is to sort of create that HTML at build time, and then you can take that HTML and put it anywhere that you want. Now, as part of this particular workshop, part of the larger demo, so I said, we're going to take a look at two apps. This is part of the larger app, which we're going to take a look at the second app. I'm also using a couple of APIs. Okay, so there's actually two APIs being used in that project. I just wanted to highlight those as well for you. So the first one is Cloudinary. So Cloudinary is a sort of cloud-based provider. They allow you to upload your media assets being images and videos. So you need to create an account, you upload your media assets to them, and then they do a bunch of things with them. They optimize those images, you can transform those images, and they also have a global CDN network, so they help you to deliver those images as well. So there's a lot of sort of optimization that you can do with it. And because Cloudinary provides SDKs for all sorts of programming languages, from Angular to React to even PHP, you can just utilize the one that fits your environment. So in our case, because we use a React-based static site generator, we are going to be using the React SDK to display some images for our products in our e-commerce platform that we're going to take a look at. And the other provider, which is actually the sort of core, or forms one of the core parts or components of our application, because we're building an e-commerce platform and we're using the Snipcart API. And Snipcart is a company that provides you with a full-blown e-commerce checkout management. Okay, so all you need to do is drop in a JavaScript and a CSS file from the Snipcart CDNs, and you will just have an entire e-commerce checkout flow ready for you, which is highly customizable. And this customization or configuration can be done using the dashboard of Snipcart. And again, this is something that we're going to show you once we get to the actual application. But both of these providers sort of adhere to what I said about using APIs in the Jamstack, right? So standing on the shoulders of giants, and there's an API for that, right? So I want to manage my images, I want to optimize them, what can I do? I can use Cloudinary. I want to use a customizable e-commerce checkout flow, I can use Snipcart, right? So it goes very well with the mantra of what I said with regards to the Jamstack. Now, hopefully you start to formulate an image about what the Jamstack can do and what it is. But there are some additional benefits to using the Jamstack, and there are much more benefits than this, but I just wanted to highlight these 4 additional ones. Actually, one we already talked about. So with regards to the APIs, auto scaling. So both Cloudinary and Snipcart in this particular example are going to automatically scale up and down, change their own infrastructure to serve your needs. You don't need to worry about it. So if you have a page about a product that has a particular image, and now, as I said, 100,000 people are viewing that page versus the 100 that you anticipated, Cloudinary will automatically scale up and down based on your needs. CDN deployment also means that once you deploy your app on a CDN, and I think I kind of touched upon this already, You will also benefit from auto-scaling and automatic load balancing as well. So CDN networks in general redirect traffic automatically. So they achieve automatic load balancing based on the total number of requests that they need to handle. Again, load balancing is something that you would have to manage if you have your own servers, etc. It can get kind of nasty. It's not necessarily something that you want to deal with. It's not necessarily something that you want to spend time with. CDNs and deploying sites on CDNs will benefit you from auto scaling and auto load balancing as well. And there's also the fact around security, right? So if you think about it, and I think the literature refers to this as an attack surface area. When it comes to an origin server, the attack surface area that you have is very large. And what they mean by this attack surface area is how many ways can I attack your system? So if you think about a traditional original server setup, you have a database server, you would have an application server. So I could insert malicious code on the server and try to execute that. I could insert malicious code to your database via SQL injection. I could attack the network connection between your application server and the database server. So there are lots of places where you have to make sure that your security is correct. If you think about the Jamstack, this attack surface area is much, much smaller. First of all, I can't execute server-side code, right? Because I don't have a server-side code execution environment. I can't do SQL injection because, again, I don't have a place to do that. With regards to network, I only have a set of CDN servers, and that is, again, managed by someone else who does automatic load balancing. So again, I don't need to worry about any of that. And it's very easy to deploy a Jamstack site. Hopefully there's going to be time for us to see how that works, and it's very easy to roll back as well. Okay, so we're going to take a look at these options as well throughout the demo. Right, so let's do this, is the message that we have here. So what are we going to do now is create a very simple application using Gatsby so that just everyone understands what Gatsby can do. I'm going to show you a few cool features of Gatsby. Once that's done, I'm then going to switch to the application that I created, which is this e-commerce application. Again, I'm going to highlight a few bits and pieces from that application, and then that is going to be probably what we have time for today. So how to do this? Okay, so let me bring up my console here. And so first of all, Gatsby is, as I said, a React-based sort of static site generator. It has a CLI that you can install. I've already done that just to save some time, so it's installable using npm or yarn. So npm install -g gatsby-cli is the command that you need to run if you ever want to install Gatsby. It's all in their docs. It's nothing particularly special about this. Now, I know that there's a command that I need to run, which is going to be very long. So let me just do this. I will call this a test-site. I'm going to tell you what these things mean in just a second. And we need a link to GitHub. Okay, so just to explain to you, this is going to create a new Gatsby site. So new is one of the options. Test-site is going to be the folder that is going to create. And optionally, you can pass in an already existing starter. Okay, so Gatsby provides these various starter packs that you can just use, which should be a link to a Git page. And this is actually the one that they created. So this is the official Gatsby.js starter, one of the official starters, which is, I just find the most simple one. Okay, so you add this command, and then Gatsby is going to set up this particular application for us. Okay, so while this is happening, let me open a new sort of tab. And what I'm going to do is just enter Gatsby here and show you the options that you have with Gatsby. Okay, so Gatsby new was the command that I just used. As I said, it will create a new Gatsby project. That's fair enough, right? Now, there are some additional things that the Gatsby CLI can do for us. And the one that, if you ever want to create a Gatsby site, so the one that you would be using is Gatsby Develop. Okay, so Gatsby Develop starts a development server. It's going to watch all your files, do automatic rebuilds, hot reloading, etc., etc. So basically, you start Gatsby Develop once, and then you can start to develop your application, and then you can have the browser on another screen. It will automatically update, and you can just have a very good developer experience or development experience even when it comes to Gatsby. Another important command is Gatsby build. Gatsby build is a command that will allow you to build a Gatsby project. And when they actually say build, this is the place, or this is the command that you need to issue if you want to create the static pages. Okay, so Gatsby build will create the markup. It's going to create the markup at build time. So this is what I was referring to during the presentation. And it has some additional, commands. Gatsby cleans, kind of resets the project. So it's going to clean its own cache and do stuff. The REPL, you can have this, sort of interactive environment within Gatsby. You can have recipes, telemetry for sort of, data collection. And there are some other options as well. But, if you will first start with Gatsby, you will most likely do Gatsby build, maybe clean, and of course Gatsby new to create a new project. Okay, so this is about halfway through installing some dependencies and stuff. So what I'm going to do is open that folder that we just created. So just bear with me for 1 second. I need to open that in my code editor. And what is it? Test-site. Where is my code editor? Okay, it's right here. Okay, so if we go back here, I can close this. Okay, this is still installing. Fine. While the installation is happening, I wanted to go through some of the basic files and folders that you get in a Gatsby project. So, when you first start with a Gatsby project and you use a very simple starter, this is the sort of structure that you would end up having. And as you can see, there is a configuration file in the root of your project, which is called Gatsby config.js. Okay, so Gatsby config.js is probably the most important configuration file that you can ever come across in a Gatsby project. Okay, so at this point in time, there is only a plugins property on the modular export, which indicates that you can probably utilize some sort of plugins in Gatsby, which is true, but you can add any sort of other options in here. So there's a lot of configuration that can take place in a Gatsby project. All of that, or about 95% of that, would come to the Gatsby config file. Okay, so in that sense, this is sort of the heart of your Gatsby application. This is the place where you add your plugins, you configure your plugins, you sort of fine-grain your plugins and see how your plugins would work and configure them. On top of this, there's of course node modules. There's also this source folder, which currently contains a pages folder, and inside the pages folder, there is an index.js file. So this particular index file, as you can see, is nothing more than just a very simple React file, right? It actually says import React from React, and then you have export default function home, return, and then returns hello world. So if you used React before, then you look at this and you think, okay, this is just a React component. Now, what's important to remember with regards to Gatsby is the fact that, remember, we have this pages folder. So basically, the content of the pages folder is going to be driving your routing. So if I put another JavaScript file into the pages folder, the name of that file will become another route in my application. So the entire application routing is based on the pages folder that you see right here. Okay, and I'm going to demo this to you in just a second, but we need for this installation to complete. It's nearly there. And of course, it's not only just files. So if I create a new folder under the pages folder, and then I create new files inside that subfolder, that is going to be, again, some nasty routing, right? So all the folders and all the files that you place under the pages folder are going to be driving how your routing works inside your application. Now, this is a fairly simple, Gatsby project, as you can see. In the e-commerce example that we're going to take a look at, there's going to be additional configuration files. There's going to be a Gatsby browser, there's going to be a Gatsby node, and there's going to be a Gatsby config.js file as well. And there's going to be some additional folders under the source folder as well. So for example, if you'd like to create a component and reuse that component throughout multiple pages, you can create a new folder under source. You could create components folder, and you could add those components in there. And just like in any React application, you could import that component in anywhere inside your application, right? So it's going to be just very easy to use that. Okay, so installation and setup is done. Your new Gatsby site has been successfully bootstrapped. You can cd into that folder and then run Gatsby develop. Okay, so we are already in that folder. So what I'm going to just do is type in Gatsby develop. Okay, so Gatsby develop will create a build of this particular application, and on top of that, it is also going to fire up an HTTP server for us. So we're going to have an HTTP development server, which I'm going to also open in just a moment. Okay, so that's, there's a bunch of steps that Gatsby is doing, kept copying the files, etc., generating those static pages, creating a development bundle, and then hopefully in a moment we have this message that says you can now view your project on localhost 8000. Okay, so let me put this to the side. We don't need this anymore. What we need is a new Chrome window, and I'm going to go to localhost 8000. And what we get, of course, is hello world, because this is what we return from our component. Now, as I said, files in the pages folder will drive the routing. So let me add about.js and create this page, and I'm going to say hello, and this is the about page, and just save this. So now in my browser, if I go to /about, then I'm taken to that about page, right? So now I am seeing, hello, this is the about page. And just to sort of prove my point here, if I now create a new folder under pages, like say products, and inside products I can put index.js, and I can put I don't know, prod1.js or something. Then inside index.js I can say this is product index, and this is the product list, for example. And then for product 1, I could say that this is product 1. Okay. If I go back to the browser, if I now go to /products, I now have the product list message. If I go to product slash, what was it, prod one, then I now see this is product one. Okay, so basically, as I said, the files and folders that you see here drive the routing of your application. Now, I don't want to spend a lot of time, talking about the basics of Gatsby, although I would love to. But as I said, the sort of resource that I'm going to give you will go more into the details of this and how to, work with the different files and how to create components, etc. in Gatsby. Instead, what I would like to show you is that baked-in GraphQL capability inside Gatsby, because that was one of the things that I really enjoyed in Gatsby. Is it kind of helps with development. So I'm going to show an example on how to run a GraphQL query inside your Gatsby project. Okay, so how can you do that? Well, luckily for us, and actually let me do some cleanup here. So let me remove products from here. We can also remove about, and let's just work with index. So luckily for us, we can straight away import stuff from Gatsby. If I do import from Gatsby, I can specify what I want to import. And there's this thing called use static query. And there's also GraphQL that I can import from Gatsby. Now, what's really interesting is that you may have seen and noticed this message here. We can view the app on localhost 8000, but if we want to see this thing called the GraphQL IDE, then we need to go to localhost 8000 ___ GraphQL. So let's actually visit that. So let's go to ___ GraphQL. And this is a GraphQL Explorer, which means that we can explore all the potential queries that we can run against our current Gatsby site. So why is this important? Well, let me give you one use case, and there's of course multiple use cases in here. So we want to run some GraphQL query here, but let's think about this for a moment. Usually when you create a website, you have some metadata for your site that is used everywhere. Title, maybe the information in the footer, maybe the information in the header, maybe the description of the site. That information should be made available in multiple places. So what Gatsby allows us to do, we can go back to the configuration here, and we can add, as I said, any property to the module exports object. And I'm going to just add one, and you can name this whatever you want. I'm just going to call it site metadata. And I can now add any metadata here, right? So I can say Tamas, I can then say, I don't know, company, company URL. I can just add metadata. I could add a description. Okay, and you can add any sort of pieces of metadata here. So we added author, company, URL, and description. And I'm going to hit save. Now, every now and then, when you do a change inside Gatsby config, you get this message that says you need to restart this process, right? So if you make changes in Gatsby config, usually you need to Control-C from the running process and you need to run Gatsby develop again, okay? But the CLI is going to warn you when you need to do that. Okay, what happened here? Oh, I forgot to add a comma right there, I think. Yeah. Let's run this again. And hopefully, the whole process will just start again. And it does. Okay, so we added some metadata in here, but why did we do that? Well, let's go back to our Explorer here. And what I want you to realize is that now that information that we added is actually made available to the GraphQL interface used inside Gatsby. So if I go to, for example, all site, and I think it's on the page. No, it's not. No, so it's not here. It's under. Where is it? Is it site? Yes. So under site, notice that we have site metadata, which should already ring a bell because that is the property that we added. If we extend that, then we see author, company, description, title, URL. So I can say, give me the author, the URL, and the company values. So this is our query. And if I hit run, I get this information back straight away from from GraphQL and from Gatsby. That means I could take this query, and now I should somehow run this query inside one of my pages. Now you can run this query inside a component or inside a page. It really doesn't make a difference. But let's just keep everything simple, because otherwise we're going to run out of time. So let me just run this query here. And I'm going to say use data, and I'm going to say use static query. So there are two types of queries that you can run. A static query is a query that doesn't take an input parameter, so it's a truly static query. This is a static query that we run because we just want to get the the author and the company values, and then you then put GraphQL in here, and in between backtick characters, you now can specify the query that you want to run. Okay, so this is the query that we want to run. And basically we created this data variable, right? So inside the data variable, we will have the response for this query, and we can extract that by using dot walking. So we can say data dot site metadata dot author dot URL dot company, right? So I can say, let's just change this slightly. And let's just add a fake footer and say this page was created by, and then we can say what was it, data.site metadata dot author, and we can say 2020 copyright, and then we can say data.site metadata dot company, and then we could add the URL as well. So let's just save this, and if we open up the page, localhost 8000, then we have this information here. Okay, so this is the result from the query that is being taken from the Gatsby configuration file. This is a very simple example, but in the next example that I'm going to show you, you will see that you can query for not only content that you added, but you can also query for content files. You could also query for, you could query for whatever content that you have inside your project, because Gatsby and GraphQL can access anything, as I said, including content files, including other things. Okay, so hopefully this makes sense, and I'm sorry that I have to keep this very brief, but hopefully you get an idea about what Gatsby is doing. In fact, let me do one more thing. If I Control-C and out from the process and I run Gatsby build, okay, let's see what happens with Gatsby build. So Gatsby build is going to create all these static pages for us, and it also builds a production JavaScript and CSS bundle for us. The result of this process, or once it's done, building static HTML for pages, it basically creates a static HTML for every page that we have, and it places the result into the public folder. So I could now take this public folder, move it to any static hosting provider, and have access to this site. Okay, and here's an index HTML, and if we explore this, in this index file, there should be, here is our content, right? This page was created by Tamas, and there's also the hello world, okay? So all the content that we had is now in this file. So if I take this file, I could just put it to any provider and it would just work. Now, interestingly enough, if I create a new folder and I call that products, and inside products, I will create prod1.js. So let's just create, let's not use this. Let's just create a very simple page, product. We don't need this query anymore. And hello product page. Okay, I'm just going to do that like so. I'm going to hit save. I'm going to run Gatsby build again. And then let's take a look at how the public folder is going to change. Now, while this is happening, so some static site generators add their final builds to a public folder, some add it to a dist folder. You know, this changes based on the static site generator that you use. Okay, so Gatsby happens to use the public folder. So if I open this now, I still have that index.html here, but notice I also have a products folder, and inside products folder, there's a prod1 folder, and inside that prod1 folder, there's an index.html, which then contains all the JavaScript and CSS again, plus the hello product page, right? So it automatically generated this HTML again for us. So I could take the entire public folder, put it somewhere, and I would still have the same content that I had locally. Okay, so I hope that this makes sense, because now we're going to switch gears and we are going to take a look at another app, which I think is this one. So I need to bring that up on this screen, so just bear with me for 1 second. I need to open that, and I need to say directory. Okay, this is the project, and it's not loading, so let me just do this, and this should, oh, here we go. Right, so as you can see, this particular project is much larger. There are more configuration files, there's more stuff that we have here that we need to take a look at. And I think what I'm going to do first is I'm going to run this particular project just to show you what's happening, you know, just to show you the actual outcome. And in fact, before I do that, let's do one more thing. I mentioned the fact that Gatsby has a lot of plugins available, but I didn't kind of say why or what those are. So let me open a new browser window and just Google for Gatsby plugins, because they have a dedicated page for that, which is gatsbyjs.com/plugins. Okay, so as of today, there are 2,390 plugins available for the Gatsby ecosystem. So plugins allow you to add certain pieces of functionality to any Gatsby project. Okay, so you can go ahead and look for whatever you want to add to your particular project. So for example, let's say I would love to add Google Analytics to my project. So I'm going to search for Google Analytics. And there is a plugin called Gatsby plugin Google Analytics. So what I can do, I can click on this and I get a very good documentation about how to use this plugin and what this plugin is capable of. So I'm being told this is how I need to install it, right? So this is how I install this particular plugin and how to use it. So I have the plugins array. I need to put a new object in that array. I need to say resolve this plugin, and I have a myriad of options. Like I have a lot of options that I can configure for this particular plugin. So I could, for example, add a tracking ID, which is of course something that I would need if I want to use analytics. So there's tracking ID, and I could specify additional settings. Okay, And if I do this, I will have analytics added to my Gatsby project. Now, there are two types of plugins that you can find inside Gatsby. One is developed by the people who actually created Gatsby. So the developers behind Gatsby create these plugins. And there are also community plugins. So for example, if you see that there is a particular functionality that you want to use in Gatsby and you created a plugin, you can open source that and you could add that to this particular page. There's if I search for offline, there's a Gatsby plugin offline which will enable your Gatsby application to be a progressive web app. Okay, what it's going to do is going to make sure that if you add this particular plugin, and notice that this is another way to add the plugin, you either just specify the name of the plugin. If the plugin has configuration options, then you need to say it's a new object with resolve and options properties. And this particular project will make your application work offline. Okay, it's just that simple. You can also add options to it, and every single plugin has very good documentation so that you can take a look at all the options they provide, how to use it, how to install it, etc., etc., etc. So I like this about Gatsby as well. I like this entire, /plugins. So I like this whole idea of this, plugin ecosystem. Another thing is that if you have an existing sort of tool or maybe a CMS that you want to use, I'm sure they have, like a WordPress plugin. So if you use WordPress, you want to pull data from WordPress to a Gatsby application, then you can use this, okay, particular plugin. But not this one, because this is going to be deprecated, it seems, but you can find, the one that they are referring to here. So you need to install it with the v4 tag. Okay, and then they tell you, okay, this is how we use it. You specify, I guess, your WordPress URL, you specify additional things, and then you will be able to access the data from WordPress inside your Gatsby application. And I don't know if it says it here. I have to admit, I've never used this before. So I guess what this also means is that you will be able to query for the data via GraphQL as well, right? So once you install this plugin, you hook it up with your WordPress instance of your choice, you will be able to see the data from WordPress inside that GraphQL interface that I showed you, which means that in any page you can then now query for your data using GraphQL. I think that's a very powerful thing as well. Okay, so that's about Gatsby plugins. And the reason why I wanted to show this to you was because inside this particular project, inside this particular project, I use quite a few of these plugins. Okay, so I'm actually leveraging a lot of plugins here. Post CSS, and there's also, of course, the Snipcart plugin. There is also the source file system plugin. I'm going to talk about some of these. There's a Remark plugin, so I'm going to talk to you about some of these and show you what these do and what these mean. Okay, but without anything further to do, let's take a look at this particular application. And let's see what it is and how it works. Okay, so I'm just going to add, run a command. In fact, before I do that, I think there's one file that I need to add here, which is sort of a manual business to do. So it's a .env file. Yes, and I need an API key, which is the Snipcart API key, which I have open somewhere right here. I'm using another screen. I just add an API key. It's hidden by default, so you won't see that. I'm using an extension to sort of hide these API keys. And I will run Gatsby develop. Okay, and let's see what this site does. And I think I have about, what, 25 minutes to walk you through this site. Hopefully that's going to be enough. So Gatsby develop, again, it will create a development bundle for us, fire up an HTTP server, which means that we can open our page on localhost 8000 in hopefully just a second. Okay, it's building the development bundle. Okay, and localhost 8000 indeed, right. So localhost 8000. And here is our store. Oops, ignore this. There shouldn't be anything in the cart. You didn't see that happen. Right, so this is our application, right? So welcome to our store. If I click products, then I have a bunch of products here. British flip-flops, light jumpers, 60s outfit, poolside sunglasses. Okay, so if I click on this, then I see the product information. I don't have anything in my cart, so I can click add to cart. This item is now added. It's $9.99, so I can keep on browsing, add additional product, or I can just click here and check out and buy these products. Okay, this is our application. So what is happening here? There's a bunch of things that are actually happening. First of all, where do these products come from? All right, so let's open the source folder. And as I said, I'm using components. There's CSS, pages, of course, has index and products. And there's something called a template, which I'm going to talk to you in just a moment. But let's take a look at this content folder. Inside the content folder, there's a product folder, or products folder even. And notice that I have 4 markdown files, which happen to be exactly the same markdown files as you saw before. These are actually my products. Okay, so every product is a markdown file. And the markdown file has 2 sort of sections. One is this top part where you see these 3 dashes. This is what you would call a YAML front meta template. So it's essentially just metadata that we assign for this markdown file. And this is where I have things like the name of the product, the price of the product, an ID, sort of like an image location that it looks like, an image location, and the template key. And then under that, I have the product description. Now, how can I take this markdown file and how does this sort of render this list of products? Well, I am using a plugin. So a plugin that I use, actually I'm using 2 plugins. I'm using the Gatsby source file system. So I basically tell Gatsby that the content folder is important because it contains my products, it contains some content, and I use Gatsby transformer remark, which is a transformer plugin. So for those of you who are familiar with Remark.js, you know what it does. For those of you who are not familiar with Remark.js, Remark.js is a sort of library that takes markdown files and can produce HTML from them, okay, programmatically. So with the combination of these 2 plugins, what I can do, if I go to the GraphQL Explorer, get rid of this query, hit Explorer. Notice that I have this markdown remark added now to my list of things that I can query. So if I do edges and then node, notice that I have access to front meta, and I can query for the name and price of all my products. And in fact, this is now returned. So I have the flip-flops, I have the light jumper, I have the sunglass, and I have the outfit, right? And they all have these prices. I could also ask for the HTML for each of these, and this is the HTML representation of those individual products. And this is why I showed you before that you can run these GraphQL queries, because what's happening here is if I go to the product page, there's a lot of stuff happening here, but in the bottom of the page, all I'm doing is I'm running this particular query. Okay, there's some additional things happening, just ignore those for now. But essentially, I'm running the same query that I showed you just now, and I'm getting the name, the price, and the image values. So I'm not getting the HTML because there's no need. I'm getting the name, the price, and the image for the products page, okay, which I call the page query. Now, what I can do with this page query, I can extract the data from the component and save that as product. So basically, data all markdown remark dot edges. Try to correlate that. So data all markdown remark edges. So data all markdown remark edges here. I don't know why I can't highlight it, but it's here. Nope. Edges is basically an array of objects where the objects contain the product information. Okay, so I'm using that in my code and I map, so I iterate through them and I build up using Tailwind CSS and some other stuff. I build up the product listing pages. So I take node, format a name, node, format a price, add some CSS, and the result is basically this list of products here. Now, there's one thing that we didn't talk about is, of course, the images. I need to, I think, sort of change my pace, so I do apologize because we won't be able to finish on time now. So where do the images come from? As I said, the images are uploaded to Cloudinary, who happen to have a React SDK where they expose this image component where I can pass in some details to my image, including this thing called a public ID. Public ID is a unique identifier of an image that you upload it to your Cloudinary account. So what I have in Cloudinary is an image that has this ID, and I tell the SDK that I want to display this image from Cloudinary. Now you're probably wondering, why do I want to do this? Well, let's do a quick demo, right? So let's imagine that we have taken this image and uploaded it to Cloudinary, which will result in me having this access URL. Okay, so something, my account name, image upload, name of the file, which clearly is a JPEG image, right? This is the image of this person. If I go to the network tab, I can see that this is in fact a JPEG image, which is 583 kilobytes in size, because the image is 1000 by 688 pixels in size, okay, or in dimension. So this is good, but now I want to make sure that this image is actually optimized, right? So there are different image formats available. There's JPEG, there's WebP, there's JPEG 2000, there's PNG, etc., etc. Google Chrome, as a browser, says you need to send me WebP images because that's the most optimal image format for this particular browser. But if you try to open a WebP image in Safari, Safari doesn't understand it. At least Safari version 14 upwards may understand it, but older versions will definitely not understand it. So Safari says, if you want me to heavily optimize an image, please send me a JPEG, but send me a JPEG 2000 because that's the ideal format I want. So basically, when it comes to media optimization and image optimization, and this is true for videos as well, by the way, you need to create a WebP file for Chrome, a JPEG 3000 for Safari, and you need to figure out the logic on how to actually serve these for the requesting parties. You need to have some logic in this place. Or you can use something like Cloudinary to automatically detect the requesting browser and serve the most optimal image format for the browser. And all I'm going to do now is I'm going to extend this URL and say f_auto, which is automatic formatting. So in this case, we get the same image back, but notice that the image size is now only 49 kilobytes. The reason is because Cloudinary is now serving a WebP image as opposed to a JPEG, because it knows that we look at this image from Chrome. Now, if I take exactly the same URL and I open Safari and I paste the same URL in here, if I go to the network tab, notice that, refresh, notice that I am getting image JP2, which is JPEG 2000, which is the most optimal format for Safari. And the size is now 46 kilobytes, right? So it's kind of, it's not the same size. It's 49 versus 46. This is, you know, difference between the two image formats. But I managed to serve the same image to two different browsers, optimizing it for that browser. Okay, so Cloudinary does this automatically for us. Now, I can do additional things. So I can change this URL, and I can say Q_auto, which is automatic quality. So we can reduce the quality of the image in a way that is not going to affect the human eye. So the quality is going to be the same, but for the computer, we will remove some pixels that are not needed for us. Now, Cloudinary does this by analyzing the image automatically, and it will remove the quality, again, on a picture-by-picture basis. So if I hit enter, we went from 580 to 49 to just 32 kilobytes, and we still have a good quality image. Now, Cloudinary does other things, but hopefully this is already showing you that using a service means that I can reduce the quality, reduce the size of the image, which is very, very crucial for an e-commerce site as well. But we could change the width of this image to be 300 pixels, resulting in a 6 kilobyte image, which is very important to note that I'm doing this on the server side, right? What gets delivered to my browser is an image that is just 6 kilobytes in size. What web developers tend to do is they bring in the large file and then they shrink it down using CSS. But that means your browser still needs to download the file with that massive size. Okay, I could do, you know, a height of 300 as well, which will skew the image. But let's say I want to build a profile picture, so I can tell Cloudinary to crop a thumbnail and find the face and put the face of this person in the middle of that crop automatically, which will yield this image, which is now 300 by 300, and it's 8 kilobytes in size. So I can just generate a profile picture from that large image. Now, back to our example. Using the SDK with attributes to the props, I can build exactly the same stuff. So I have fetch format auto, quality auto, width 300, height 210. Gravity auto will try to pick the most interesting part of the image immediately. So even though I'm cropping the original dimensions down, it will still focus, keep its focus on the most important thing. So if I go back to, not here, but to here, these images are actually much larger. For example, if I click on light jumper, this is the entire image, right? So you see that this is the entire image of the model. But in here, I'm just showing the most important part, which is the upper section. This is done 100% automatically. Now, another thing that I want to show is, you know, you have this particular product here. Usually, when you have such a product, you have different variations of colors. Cloudinary actually allows you to replace the color programmatically. So this is the original color. I have this color selector here. So if I click blue, I'm not actually loading another image. I'm just overlaying the original color with blue, or with indigo, or with yellow, or with red. And if I copy the URL, it's all part of the URL again, right? So I'd say, take this color, replace it with this color, and that's pretty much it. And if you don't believe me, I can do this dynamically, because this color selector component is actually a separate component that I have with a list of colors, right? It's just taking it from this list. So I can say, add a new object in here, name, and I'm going to name this an unknown color because I have no idea what I'm going to come up with. If I would have more time, I would ask for your favorite color in hex, but we don't have time for that, unfortunately. So I'm going to say 22BB 52. I have no idea what color this is going to be, but let's refresh the page. Okay, so this is just a kind of green color. If I click on it, now it's going to overlay that color that I just came up with completely dynamically. Okay, so we can do something like maybe 54 CE and 26. This is another color. Let's refresh this. It's still green. Okay, I can't seem to get rid of greens. EE CE 26. This is now this faint yellow. So if I click on it, then this new yellow is then applied to the jumper. Okay, all of this is done 100% automatically for us. Remember, there's an API for that, standing on the shoulders of giants, right? Okay, so let's take a look at this checkout functionality as well, because that's another key component. Gatsby config has the Snipcart plugin, and as I said, I just bring in the JavaScript and the CSS that I need. That's pretty much it. Everything else is configurable from the Snipcart API. Okay, so I'm going to say Snipcart, go to their website. I am then going to go to the dashboard. So you need to log in, of course, I'm already logged in. And this is the place where I can manage my e-commerce site. So I can take a look at past orders, right? So I can take a look at abandoned carts. So let's say, now I'm going to abandon this cart. So let's navigate away from this page. I think that will count, or maybe it needs to be deployed. I'm not entirely sure. But if I were to have any sort of abandoned carts, I would be able to find them here. I could follow it up. I could see, oh, I know how to make an abandoned cart. So let's start a checkout. And I need to say tamas@test.com, 123 for street, 1, continue to shipping. This field is required. Oh, okay. I just added a whatever. Okay, that's where I want to ship. And just when I wanted to pay, I'm going to say, oh, actually, you know what? I'm not going to pay. I'm just going to go to google.com. I think this will count as an abandoned cart. Hopefully, yes. Right. So you immediately see this inside this dashboard on Snipcart, and I can now just, take a look at this particular person. And I can say, you know what? I'm going to email this person saying, hello, and then I think I can pick their name, and I can say, hello. Can we help you make a purchase? Here's 10% off, or you could just add that. But there's something that I want to show you as well. Something truly amazing. I think this is already truly amazing. But notice that for the checkout flow, I have billing, shipping, payment through 3 distinctive steps. Right now, what I can do is I can actually change this checkout flow entirely. So I can go back to my dashboard, and I can hook up my e-commerce store with payment gateways, Stripe, PayPal. I can specify my taxes, and I can specify shipping, and I can hook it up with any shipping provider, FedEx, USPS, UPS, etc. Now I'm just going to say, for whatever crazy reason, I don't want to have shipping. I'm going to disable shipping. I just, set it to off. I just refresh my page, and that step is now gone. I still have my billing information, but now I'm taken to payment directly. There's no more shipping steps. So basically, even though I am part of my site, right? This is my e-commerce site. Even though I'm part of this, I can still manage the entire checkout flow from a separate location. So hopefully this makes sense. I think I have a few minutes just to wrap up, but there's one more thing that I really want to show you, and that is how can I deploy this? Okay, and let's go and do just that. So in order to deploy this, I'm going to use a deployment provider called Netlify, where you need to log in. Okay, I'm logged in, and notice I have this new site from Git button here. Okay, I have lots of deployments. You can ignore those. I'm going to say new site from Git, and I can hook it up with any Git provider. So what I'm going to do, I don't think there is a Git folder for this, so I'm going to initialize this particular project, and I'm also going to go to github.com. Hopefully I'm logged in, and I'm going to create a new repository. I'm just going to call this workshop-test. Create this, and we are going to do a git add all. Come on. Please don't do this to me. Come on, I don't have time for this. And just do a green copy. Okay. Come on, git add all. So basically what's going to happen is we need to add all these files to, oh, I know what's happening. Sorry. .git ignore and node modules. Definitely don't need that. Definitely don't need .env, .cache, .vs code. Okay, those are not needed. Cool. So git add all. That's better. Okay, so I'm just going to commit everything. And hopefully that worked. Resolving datas. Okay, cool. So now I have everything in this Git project. So I can now say to Netlify, hey, look at this GitHub project, which I need to add manually, I think. So this is all good. Okay, so I need to find the repository that we just created, which was workshop test. Save this. So basically I'm hooking up this particular repository with Netlify. So now it should appear in my list. And if I click on this, I'm going to deploy from the main branch or from the master branch. And notice that Netlify already noticed that this is the build command, and this is the published directory that it should do, right? So when it's going to build it, it should run Gatsby build and serve up the content from the public folder. So I'm going to click on deploy site. Okay, so now I have a site deployment in progress, and this is going to take a minute or two, but after that, I will be able to access my application on this particular page. Now, I think I'm at the end of this workshop. Could I take just
Hi, Tamas. So since you're the last talk for today, I think, yeah, we can give you 5 more minutes.
No. Okay, thank you. I appreciate that, thank you. Just 5 more minutes and I'm done. So we can continue with the, the deploy is happening, right? So you can see it's building, you can click on this and you can actually take a look at the log. It's going to install the dependencies and do all sorts of things. But I wanted to show you one more thing, which is if I just run a Gatsby build locally as well, I want to show you something that hopefully will truly make you understand how this particular Jamstack world works and how this pre-rendering markup works. And Gatsby build is something that we run locally, but Netlify is also running that here. Okay, there's no correlation between what I'm doing locally and what Netlify is doing, but I want to show you that Netlify actually executes your command that you specified, where it actually picked it up automatically for us. So once we have stuff in the production, in the public folder, right, we have products and we have a static HTML for each of these products. And what's really interesting is that I can just take this entire content, go to a jsbin.com, for example, and I can just paste that HTML, and I will get that entire page that we had a look at, because every single information about the page is contained in a static site, right? This is the basically how the sort of build works, right? So everything is now available on this single page for me. So Netlify has hopefully finished the build, and we have site is live. Perfect. So what I can do, I can go back here and I can just open this thing on the new tab. And what I have here is my application running on a domain, and it's available to everyone. The functionality is still available. Now, what's truly important and truly amazing, I think, is that if you make a change, let's do source components color select, and let's change this color yet again to, I really don't know, 7722DE, and save. So let's say, you made a change, and usually what you do is git commit new color and git push, right? This is what you would do normally. Okay, so we're doing that. And if I come back to Netlify, under the deploys, what will happen is that Netlify will realize that you pushed a new change. It tells you the message, and it will do a build as well. It will automatically rebuild your project. And it will not only rebuild the project, but it's going to publish that project at some point in time as well. So you notice that this is now published. It's going to build this, so you can actually take a look at the build log. It's going to be faster because it doesn't need to reinstall all the dependencies because they are there. It will just rerun Gatsby build, and at some point in time, when the build is completed, it will publish this new version of the site. Okay, so if I just hit refresh, it's still building. Okay, so it's going to finish hopefully in a few seconds. And then you will see that this publish tag will be removed from this, production build, and it's going to be placed against this one, which is your second build. And it's done. So what that means, if I just refresh this page, now unknown color is a different color, right? It's this purplish color that we created, right? And believe it or not, you can now say, oh no, I made a mistake in production. I need to revert my changes. So you say, and you're going to see all your, production builds here. So you can just go back to any older one, and you're going to say, you know what, revert back to this one. And if I refresh this page, we are now back to whatever we had before. Okay, that's pretty much it. So I won't take up any more of your time. Let me just wrap up with these slides. So we did take a look at the demo. I'm going to make sure you get access to these. So these are all the resources that I linked to. One key resource that I want you to take away from this is this site, jamstack.training. Okay, so you can go to this site, jamstack.training. There are 10 free video courses about the Jamstack here. All of them are for free, various applications. The one that you should be looking out for is create an e-commerce app with Gatsby. Okay, this particular course, 2 or 3 hours in length, creates this e-commerce application, right? So if this was too much, I was speaking too fast, it didn't make sense, you can take a look at this course, and there are videos about how to work with GraphQL, how to add the little color selector, how to create the layouts, how to produce pages in Gatsby. So basically everything that you wanted to know about or missed in this workshop, you can just rewatch in this particular video. Okay, so that is jamstack.training. Okay, so just remember this. You need to register on the site, but no payments, no credit cards. All the courses are for free. And with that, Teddy Makassi, pronounce it. Yay! So thank you very much for having me and for your attention. I hope you you enjoyed this particular workshop as much as I enjoyed delivering it to you. And
no, that's okay.
yeah, sorry, I had
We
to
really enjoyed
rush
it,
because,
Tamas. And there's actually one, not a question, but someone just made a statement that you're gonna gain some new users on Cloudinary. They were really impressed, especially by the color
okay,
vectors.
that's good. Okay, there's a lot that we do. So that's just like one small thing that Cloudinary does. There's a
Would
lot
that be
of
a free
additional things
feature
that we
for
do.
Cloudinary?
You know,
Oh, I see.
there is a free tier, yes. There's a very generous free tier actually with Cloudinary, so you can start using it today. So if I go to, actually, if you just go to cloudinary.com, I think it's pointed out on every single page that there you see sign up for free. So you sign up, and if you go to pricing, you will see that what the free plan contains. Okay, so this is what it contains. The 25 credits, and then you need to, we're trying to revert this page on how this whole system works because people don't understand this credit-based system. But I think if you want to use this for something basic, for testing,
right. Thank you
it's
so
going to be
much.
more than enough.
I think other than that, do you guys have any questions? All good? Okay, great. Tamas, I think that's all. Thank you so much for your talk again. We really enjoyed it.
Okay. No problem. Thank you for having me again.
You too.
And
Stay
have a
safe.
good evening.
Bye.
Thank you. You too. Bye.